Welcome back to another edition of the Edge podcast. Publisher Brenden Slaughter from BeaversEdge.com, joined by my new co-host, TJ Mathewson, BeaversEdge.com writer, been working with us for a little over a year now. TJ, welcome to the pod, man. Excited to start doing these pods with you.
Good to be on, Brendan. Good to get to do more of what I naturally do in day-to-day life and talk into a microphone instead of write. So it's more a little bit more up my alley. So this is good. It's good to be on. It's good for fall camp to be wrapped up. Those fall camp days are pretty long. I mean, I know it's long for the players, but it's long for us media too. So all you listeners, try sitting out at football practice for 4 or 5 days a week for two plus hours, talking to coaching players for sometimes an hour, like 30 minutes after, and then, you got to go do all the editing and stuff. But those are long days for us too. But now we get into the real content, the regular season, and it goes by in a flash. So we're ready for it.
No doubt, and TJ alluded to multiple things there. Obviously, today was the last day of fall camp as we're recording this podcast on Tuesday, August 23rd. Today was day 18 of fall camp. The Beavers will take Wednesday, Thursday off, and then transition into kind of some bonus Boise State prep, as Jonathan Smith alluded to. And then you also mentioned, TJ, you've been our boots on the ground for the majority of August, being in fall camp, covering for Beavers Edge. The awesome subscribers at BeaversEdge.com have gotten a chance to read your, nugget reports and watch the interviews and everything. Before we kind of get into the nitty gritty of fall camp, as we're kind of doing that as a wrap up pod this week, just kind of tell me what were your impressions of this fall camp. You obviously got to see a little bit of Oregon State's fall camp last year when you came to Corvallis. I'm curious kind of what your vibe was. Obviously before this, you'd seen some fall camps before. So I'm just curious, what was your overall impression of this one?
Well, I guess you take this away from a lot of the interviews and such. And, I wrote it in the Nugget Report plenty, but my main take was probably just the energy that the defense was able to gain from Trent Bray, and, sort of a relief of having his system in place where they're allowed to go play how they actually want to play. And their play reflected it throughout camp until we got not booted, but, they closed camp on us on last week. So, up until then, we had saw the defense the majority of the days dominate. And, the defense normally does dominate throughout the early parts of camp as well. And the first scrimmage both you and I were at, it wasn't even really a competition. I mean, the offense got to the 1 yard line one time, and then, failed on four straight plays on the 1 yard line. So that energy from the defense, I'm very curious how it's going to carry over to the season. I mean, is it enough for Oregon State to be a top half of the Pac-12 defense? Because historically, that's a plus for the guys you're able to recruit here. Hey, if we can just get into the top half of the conference, I think there's enough offensive talent there where you could realistically look at a 9-win season, and something that actually is a substantial improvement here in Jonathan Smith's fifth season 5, right?
Yes, right. It's already adding up
yeah,
quickly, isn't it?
It's 5, yeah. So that's the kind of jump you want to see a coach really take in his 5th season with a program. 120 guys that he recruited, and his offense that he wants in there with Brian Lindgren, and the defense that he trusts Trent Bray to take over. That's the kind of jump we got to need. And the defense, I feel like we could both agree that that's the biggest factor, because that's the biggest thing that really hasn't been there during Jonathan's tenure.
For sure. I mean, again, a lot of terrific points, and it's funny because I almost kind of look at this, TJ, a little bit as Jonathan Smith's 4th year, because does anybody really count 2020 out west?
No, not really.
I mean
Oregon State did have like the plus. I think they were the only Pac-12 team that played every game, right? So I guess you could take it as that, but regardless, I mean, the travel is weird. There's no fans, etc. And it was like, I'd say one thing of value, they was able to grind out some close games, didn't come up on the right side of a lot of them. But in that case, it's like, hey, we can play with these guys, even if we're at, a significant talent disadvantage against some teams. So, it is, but, we can now say this is his 4th full season, but you made the bowl game last year.
For sure.
The bowl game has been made. So now that should be the floor, right? If you want to be a successful program, the floor should be bowl game. It should be probably LA Bowl, because that was at the bottom-ish of the bowl lineup, if I remember. So, like, now you go up, and if you believe your talent is better across the board and your scheme is better with Trent Bray and you have more explosion at running back, we'll get into all these factors as we dive in here. Then, 8-9 wins and, a higher bowl, a Vegas bowl, a Sun Bowl, maybe you can sneak into the Alamo Bowl if you really, really do well. And hey,
Right.
no one would complain with the Rose Bowl. You got to go win the conference. And, the top of the Pac-12 this year is pretty good. With Utah at the top, USC as talented as ever, UCLA very senior laden. The future of the Big Ten is strong in the Pac-12, so you gotta look out for that.
Yeah, well said. Well said, my friend. And it's definitely interesting because I completely agree with you. I think now that the rebuild of sorts is now complete, now it's about it's one of the biggest conversations I've posed on Beavers Edge, other places throughout the last year, and that's just, does Oregon State plateau, or do they keep building from that point? And I think the good news is, after some pretty lean years, the Beavers are in a position now where TJ, even on the off years now, they'll be in that consideration, I would, for 5-6 wins at minimum, unlike, some of the years that, we sat through, the beginning of Jonathan's tenure and the end of the previous tenure when, winning more than 2-3 games a year looked tough. So I think that speaks to Jonathan Smith's ability to build a program. I mean, the fact that, let's look at the opposite. Unlike, a brand new head coach in Eugene that walks into a treasure trove of talent.
Yeah.
Jonathan Smith,
absolutely.
When he came to Corvallis, was like, oh, is that the water boy? No, I'm just kidding. But no, I mean, it's definitely...
Jack Cleto's getting some reps under center, like
right.
that.
So it was lean. I think they had something like 3 scholarship defensive linemen, and in a place like Oregon State, you have to kind of build year by year with transfer portal additions, great recruiting classes, have some guys that are maybe overlooked a little bit that hit. And I think we've started to see that so far. So I think the program is definitely in a level of kind of sustained success. And, you just brought up a good point. I think it'd be a good time to kind of give what we think our floor and ceiling is for this year. And, the way that I see when I look up the schedule, I see the floor as being 6-6. I think the Beavers are more than capable of getting to a bowl game this year. And I think the ceiling could be 9-3. I really do think that this year, with the amount of seniors that the group has, the amount of experience, if things click, the ball bounces your way. I could really see the Beavers, having a pretty good year, and arguably their best year since 2012 when they went 9-4 and went to the Alamo Bowl. So I would guess that, I just watched the interview you posted today, TJ, from Kyrie Fisher. He's one of my favorite interviews on the team, when he's like,
oh, he's fabulous. He's a great talker too.
Yeah. And he's just like, we're hungry. We're so hungry for this season. And, I imagine he's not the only guy, just from our conversations talking to the players between the start of the season and now. It seems like there's a lot of kind of, maybe not anger, but just a little bit of frustration with how they lost to Utah State in that bowl game last year. The fact that the Beavers looked really, really good for like the first minute of that game, and then not so much for the rest.
You got to play all 60.
Right, no kidding. So that's where I see for kind of this season, as we kind of will get into some of the bigger storylines. But TJ, where do you see this group this year?
So floor wise, I would say the floor has to be 6. I don't think you can do anything else. Like we said, the rebuild's over. So floor should be 6 wins if you consider yourself a winner and you're that hungry and you feel like your team is deep enough along the defensive and offensive lines, deep enough at the skill positions. We know they're deep enough at running back. Get good enough play from your quarterbacks. I mean, that's you want to ask for, and that should get you to 6 wins. I mean, just looking at the schedule, the ceiling, I agree with you, should probably be about 9 wins. I spot 4 games on here that most likely you won't be probably a touchdown plus underdog.
Right.
I mean, it might not be a touchdown underdog at Fresno State, but that's going to be an incredibly tough environment. It's going to be hot. Central California Valley. Jake Hayner is one of the best quarterbacks in the country. Jeff Tedford's back there as well. And then you have your first 2 conference games, USC and Utah. I mean, it's gonna be tough going to Salt Lake City and beating Utah. So that might be a 2 touchdown spread on that game. So that would be a really tough one. You have, USC and Lincoln Riley coming here to Reser Stadium, but nonetheless, that's not very easy. Even if people don't believe USC isn't quite at that level, just the amount of talent that Lincoln was able to bring in the transfer portal probably should be enough there. And then you scroll down, a November game at Husky Stadium in Washington. It'll be loud. It'll probably be pouring rain. It'll be a real, grind it out, and a team like Oregon State with the plethora of running backs they have, and if they're stout along those lines, could be able to hold up in that game. But that's another game I look at, and it's like, that's really tough. So, you'd think the ceiling should be around 8-4 and 9-3 wins. But if you really think, again, if you're a program that needs to take that next step, you should probably hit that ceiling this year.
Right.
Or especially how the schedule sets up.
Most definitely. I think you hit some good points on the schedule. And, particularly, it's just interesting to see how, like, other than Utah, right? We consider Utah to be the class of the Pac-12 this year.
Yeah, but easily, I think.
Right. And Oregon State beat them last year. They were the only team to beat them in conference. So when you have that kind of confidence, I think if you're the Beavers, you go, hey, I'm not saying they're going to win that game in Salt Lake, but I think it just kind of gives you a confidence to know, hey, we measured ourselves up against the best last year. Granted, we had some slip ups looking at you, Colorado and Cal, but
that's 9 wins, right?
Right. So I think more than anything, this year, just being able to build up that confidence is going to be key. And that's where I think, I've talked about it on this podcast for many years now, the beginning of the season and starting off on a strong note. And I think even back to last year, I would like to think that the Oregon State team, when they were playing their best, probably would have beat Purdue, maybe comfortably. So, it's one of those things where, like, you can't slip up against Boise State. Fresno State's kind of that game that, is out there that, don't get me going on that, TJ, because I'll be the first to tell you that there's nothing to gain from ever going to play in Fresno, and a Pac-12 team should never play in, Fresno or any other, real tough Mountain West environment. They got, they got to come. They got to come to, they got to come to the pack a little bit. And, Oregon State's had some adventures. The old Beaver fans will know what I'm talking about, some adventures down there in Fresno. But I look at, the non-conference, if they can come out of the non-conference 3-0, and I think it's a big if.
That's a tough, it's not last year's non-conference slate.
No. And
Hawaii, Fresno State and Montana State is a pretty big step up from Idaho and Hawaii.
Certainly. And then you also have to consider that Montana State was in the FCS championship this last year. So it's you're not even getting that cupcake FCS team. Again, Beaver fans have some memories of those FCS teams. So the schedule definitely prepares you for Pac-12 play if you're going to look at kind of the positives of it. And you alluded to USC, TJ. I'd be willing to bet that USC is not firing on all cylinders with Lincoln Riley by, game 3, game 4, game 5, even. I mean, it might take the whole year. I mean, not to say that USC won't be good this year. I think they have all the ability to be, but, go back and look at like what Nick Saban did his first year at Alabama, right? They lost to
Louisiana. They lost to Louisiana Monroe.
When you're trying to rebuild that culture as Lincoln is and kind of, don't get me wrong, they will be so good for so long. But if there was a year to beat them, it would be maybe this year. So, if you could set yourself up 3-0 going into that USC game, TJ, I really think, you could have the makings of a really special season. If you're 2-1, it's not the end of the world. But the most important thing is I think you have to go 2-1 in non-conference.
Yeah, you have. I mean, I think that's bare minimum. And going back to the USC thing in terms of beating them, it's when Lincoln Riley takes over, it's not like he's taking over one of the most talented rosters in the country. He did not. I mean, There's a lot of work to be there. A lot of what Clay Helton left behind was subpar especially along the lines. And you'd see it when they play a team in another conference, they just get their ass kicked on both offensive and defensive lines. But yeah, I think the non-conference, it should be minimum 2-1. And if you're going to hit your ceiling, 3-0, it has to be. If there's a road game to take, I'd say that Washington road game at the beginning of November and then Fresno State are probably the two road games that you're probably not going to be favored in, or that you probably shouldn't win, that you should win. You should take one of them. And I'd say that Fresno State one would be a good one, judging that you're going to be facing, more on your own talent level, if not better talent. You have better talent, overall up and down the roster than Fresno State does, unlike, the guys up in Washington.
Certainly, and I honestly think, just based on the way that non-conference shakes out, TJ, like, Oregon State could go and beat Boise State in week 1, and it would be impressive to me. But I really think we're going to find out a lot about this team based on how they do in Fresno in week 2, because
Yeah.
it's I think the first game in research, I think they'll play well. It's a new stadium coming together. Fans are going to be even more out after you had some that were like, hey, we're going to go back. Like, it should be full, fans, full crowds, all those kind of
Mm-hmm.
things for the first time, out here out west, and people feeling real comfortable with all that. It's that Fresno State game that I think you're going to learn a lot about this football team, because you're going into what is, I think, a really hostile environment for a Mountain West team. They have, one of the better home field advantages of a mid-major, I guess is what you'd call Fresno State, of
Group of
sorts
five.
in basketball terms. Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Group of 5. But yeah, no. And then, as you alluded to, sneaky rehire in the offseason, bringing back Jeff Tedford, who
Yeah.
Pac-12 fans know very well. Jeff Tedford, obviously long time Cal head coach, and this is now his second stint at Fresno, and he's going to have those guys ready to go for those chances against Pac-12 teams. So
Mm-hmm.
we'll obviously be talking about each game weekly as we kind of get into it, and TJ and I will be doing a weekly podcast. We'll also be bringing on BeaversEdge recruiting analyst Dylan Callaghan-Crowley, also at some various junctures, to get his take on recruiting and obviously get his predictions as well. But circling back to fall camp, so we can put a bow tie back on that, there's a couple position group battles that we're obviously still watching. TJ, we're only, let's see, 10-ish days from the start of the season. Oregon State still doesn't have a starting
exactly 10.
quarterback. What's up with that?
It's honestly, it doesn't seem like a secret much longer. The coaching staff still keeps it under wraps, and if they surprise us, well, I think me and you both will be extremely surprised. But it's going to be Chance Dolan. I mean, he's taken about 95% of the first team reps from day 1 of fall camp on. I mean, he got that right away and played it through. He might not have the best tools. I mean, I think Ben Goldbranson, as we keep saying, has the best arm. He has better legs too. Better overall athlete. He's a little bigger than Chance as well. But it just have a really hard time thinking that it would be Chance. I mean, they continue Jonathan, after the scrimmage, as you guys listened to his video, his interview on Saturday, he's like, we're going to go look at the tape. We'll, look at it really closely and such. And it's like, yeah, okay. But they keep putting Chance out there with the first team. So I have a hard time seeing him not starting with the first team. Ben Goldbranson, I think, will back up. Again, I think his tools are just too good to bury third on the depth chart. He throws well on the run. He's got the best deep ball. Maybe not accuracy-wise, not quite yet. No one was really hitting the deep ball. I know that was a big concern on the message board. But I think they're gonna need some more time to work that out. Maybe in the last week they've gotten some better shots at that. While we were there, though, they did struggle a lot hitting passes down the field. You could probably count on one hand, I think, how many they completed beyond maybe 35, 40 yards.
Yeah.
But, Goldbranson definitely, his best arm, his legs are really good. He could beat linebackers around the corner from the pocket, flushed out of the pocket. He can beat some linebackers around the corner and scoot up.
I've seen it myself.
Seen him do it. Yeah, we've seen him do that multiple times in practice. He can absolutely do it in games, and I think that's a really valuable asset to have. Chance has good legs too. We've seen that. Goldbranson, with the bigger build, maybe he can be a little bit more physical of a runner. He doesn't get hit in camp, but once the pads go on and the lights turn on and the game starts, maybe they will have him lower his shoulder a time or two and maybe run a quarterback draw or something. So that would be interesting. I think Tristan Gebbia is going to be third on the depth chart. I could be wrong. He's had some good moments in camp, but I just don't think he's had quite as much to offer as Goldbranson does. And Goldbranson with another fall camp under his belt, looking at pretty decent command of the offense. I would say production-wise in total, Gebbia and Goldbranson are close. But, I think that the coaching staff might lean with the tools of Goldbranson over Tristan Gebbia.
Yeah, I have some thoughts on the quarterback competition itself, but real quick, I'm just curious. In your opinion, TJ, do you think that it would be wise to make Ben Goldbranson the backup so he doesn't potentially look elsewhere?
Yes. I think so. So what's Chance's eligibility at? I forget.
So
Is he a
Chance of
redshirt
redshirt junior.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, I mean, yeah. I mean, if we can even look back to last year. I mean, the starting quarterback that was named lasted a half, one half. I don't think.
Very true.
I don't think Chance is only going to last a half as starting quarterback, judging that he started all other 11 games last year. So that
it's just an intriguing thing.
Yeah, it is an intriguing. It is an intriguing thing, and I think Ben has some time. I feel like you put maybe one more full season in, and then maybe think about that. I don't necessarily think he would be in a total rush to do that.
Right.
Because again, Chance had some things from last year that he needed to work on. Like the coaches said it multiple times, how many things Chance needed to work on. And, they liked his performance in camp. And again, we think he's going to be the starter, but I'm not totally sure he is, mastered all these things, and the coaching staff doesn't see what they want to from him.
Yeah.
And the offense is struggling and the ball's not going farther than 10 yards down the field. You have this big-armed redshirt freshman kid with great legs, sitting on the bench. And if you're really struggling, that can't hurt to have on as a backup. So, that is an interesting thought. If that was the main concern on their mind, then absolutely, yes, I would do that.
Yeah, it's definitely something that's interesting because, I look at this quarterback competition, through, obviously your practice reports and what I was able to see with my own eyes during the scrimmage. And, it's not to say that I don't think Tristan Gebbia could win you games. I just don't think he's the best quarterback on this roster. I'm not sure he's even, the top two necessarily. And that's just my opinion from what I've been able to see. I mean, the scrimmage that we did see, he struggled, TJ, and it wasn't really, a secret that he struggled. And, he could have obviously come back, and I think he brings a lot of experience. I mean, you're talking about a multi-year captain. He's loved in the locker room, right? He is a glue guy. But I think we saw last year the coaching staff was, not afraid to, put the best guy out there. And, as I kind of look at how the, quarterback recruiting is shaking out and everything else, I look at it as, Chance Nolan is, the guy who, took you to a bowl game last year and, won you a handful of games. And, I'm factoring this into my answer, TJ, maybe more so than any other player that I have seen in covering my 8 years of Oregon State football, 7 years, whatever it is.
That's a long time.
Chance Nolan is a different player in the game than what he shows you in practice. There are guys who are gamers, and I really think he's one of those guys who, it's not to say that he's not doing it all at practice. I just think he has that extra gear that kind of kicks in during games, and he's kind of got that gamer mentality. And that's where I think last year, heading into the season with him and Sam Neuer, maybe Sam Neuer looked better in fall camp, which he did,
which he did. He absolutely did.
Don't blame the messenger, folks. It was me, it was just about everybody that was Sam Neuer looks like the guy. Chance was struggling a little bit. And then you put those guys in the game, right? And you see how they do, with their feet in the fire. And, I think that is, a factor that I think will loom large. And I think something that even helps out Gebbia to an extent is the fact that they've been there and got it. But, the case with Gebbia is I think if I had to guess, Oregon State is probably where his playing career ends, regardless of what happens. And when you've got, as we mentioned, Ben Goldbrinson, who's been in the system for a few years now, you've got Travis Throckmorton, who came in as, obviously this year as a true freshman who, might have the biggest arm. I mean, he's close with Goldbranson. He's got some nice tools. He needs some time to develop as Goldbranson.
Yeah,
obviously.
Him and Montiel both looked like true freshmen during camp.
For sure. But again, Travis had some, he was a pretty touted recruit. And then I think of, who the Oregon State's got coming in the 2023 class. So, the quarterback is always kind of a year by year thing, but just as I see it, I think Chance Nolan is still Oregon State's, best option, so to speak. And, your assessment of how the quarterback, depth chart shakes out is pretty much mine. I think that's ultimately what's going to happen. And, whether or not it's next week or, maybe Jonathan Smith surprises us on Friday, TJ. You never know.
Yeah. We don't know.
I think Friday or Monday when they release the depth chart, we'll know. So
yeah, I think we'll get a good idea of that. And just one more thing to add on.
Sure.
In conclusion, if the Beavers are going to hit their ceiling, I do think we need to see more out of Chance Nolan. I absolutely do. I don't think they're going to get there with just the running game, and they'll play better defense, I think, with Trent Bray as they did over the second half, the last 4 games of last year. But they're going to need more out of a quarterback. They might need Chance Nolan to go win them a game. Straight up go win them from kickoff to the buzzer hitting 0. I mean, you to be a good team like that, you need your you'll need your quarterback good enough to go win you a game like that.
And, think back to, the most recent successful seasons in school history. And, they had those guys. I mean, you go back to the last time Oregon State was good. You had Sean Mannion, right? That guy could go win you a game, right? Kind of a thing. Before that, you had, Matt Moore, you had, so on and so forth. There's always been kind of that gamer whenever whenever Oregon State's had their really good years, Miss Lyle Moivo in there as well. And then you look at the years maybe where it wasn't quite so good. They didn't have a lot of consistency, or the quarterback, was, not necessarily healthy the whole year, or a whole bunch of other factors. So I agree with you. And I think more than anything, they're going to have to get that vertical passing game going. I think the running game is going to be what it was last year. The big guys up front, TJ, I mean, has there been a more consistent group all fall camp? Jim Mahalchek's 5 up there, other than having Tyler Morano in there for Talise Fuaga early on. It's been very consistent.
Yeah, it has been really consistent. Personally, I think it's a little hard to grade offensive line during fall camp. I didn't include them much in the Nuggets. It's just, I don't have film to break down offensive linemen. I'm not replaying, running sets, running plays back in my head. So, it's a little hard to evaluate, but, they're very healthy. It's a deep group. They're all very confident that multiple guys can play in multiple positions. I wasn't personally too impressed with the amount of running room they were generating, but I would like to credit that a little bit to the improvement along the defensive line and the scheme of Trent Bray. So we'll give them a pass for that for now. I think we'll get a much better look at really how good they are when they get, 40, maybe 35, 40 runs in against Boise State and evaluate that group. And I think it's the same thing with the running back group. I mean, this running back group is deep. And they're, that offensive line is going to, whoever they're blocking for, if they're going to block for Damian Martinez or Deshaun Fenwick or Jam Griffin or even Trey Lowe. I mean, all 4 of those guys have been on the first team during fall camp. So, they're going to have a good guy back there to block for, I think.
Yeah, and it'll be interesting to see how that shakes out. I don't think I think there'll be a lot of oars on that part of the depth chart. I think each guy's kind of shown something, but kind of like last year when we were like, is BJ Baylor going to be, you kind of just got to see how those guys, get out there with the ball in their hands and whatnot. If there's a position I'm not worried about, it's that, because there's depth up and down. But just to kind of, wrap up kind of the podcast a little bit, let's kind of move over to the defense and kind of give our thoughts on that. For the most part, the defense, I think, won fall camp essentially, from start to finish. Obviously the offense found their rhythm a little bit later, but I really like what we saw from Trent Bray. Aggression seemed to be kind of the theme. And it's one of those things where we've talked about it a lot. Now we have to see when the rubber meets the pavement,
Yeah, I really want to see the matchup with another team. And we saw a little bit of it last year. He can't do his full install midseason. So, he can add a thing or two here or there, shift a guy over, put another guy down on the line, put his hand in the turf. But, now he's got a full camp of install. Okay, so what is this scheme really about? Are they going to be too aggressive, right? I remember my freshman year at ASU, I forget who the defensive coordinator was, but, they had a tendency for, being as aggressive as humanly possible. They'd get some sacks, they would get some pick sixes, but then they would also, I think they led the entire nation in passes allowed at 50 yards or more because they were so aggressive that guys would be wide open.
Right.
So I'm wondering, I think I've asked Trent Bray about this before, and you said, it is a balance of making sure guys are in their right spots. And as far as we saw during fall camp, guys were absolutely in the right spots. I mean, that defense looked mighty impressive. The secondary guys were, hanging right under the hip of receivers. The defensive line was getting plenty of pressure on the quarterback. Ben Gulbranson, Nolan, they're all scrambling. out to their left, out to their right, trying to get free. So that'll be good. It'll be interesting to see. I want to see how much pressure they're able to generate, because if you have a good pass rush, you generate a lot of pressure and you force the quarterback out of the pocket and make mistakes. And, they did that to the Oregon State quarterbacks here in fall camp, and Chance Nolan, Ben Goldbranch, and Tristan Gebbia all threw interceptions because there were too much pressure in their face and they were forced to throw something they didn't want to throw. And the defense took advantage of it. And that DB group is impressed too, to take advantage of those mistakes.
Yeah, it's definitely, you hit on some good points there with Trent Bray and some other things, kind of getting in with the defense. But I'm kind of curious, from your perspective, what's that defensive line been like? Because, you look at the secondary, as you mentioned, I really like, so far how, there's a lot of depth there. There's a lot of talent there. We're still waiting to see how the kind of rotation shakes out. But there's one thing I saw, in your reports and whatnot, which is very physical play. I really like what the secondary is bringing. We obviously need to see how they match up, but that's not particularly the area I'm concerned about. It's still just as it has been for many years. We alluded to it at the top of this podcast. Oregon State's defensive line has not really performed 10 years, give or take. I mean, it's been, probably 2012 was the last time you could say, man, they had some dudes on that defensive line, Scott Crichton, Dylan Wynn, some others. So I guess my question is, do you think what we've seen, they finally have some more depth? I like what we're seeing. Give me your thoughts on the defensive line. I think they're moving in the right direction.
Yeah, and the loss of Ryan Frankie at outside linebacker, helping out that pass rush, that's big. But otherwise, it did seem like they got some good push, mostly on the starters. We saw Simon Sandberg, we saw Joe Golden, we saw James Rawls there on the starting, the top of the depth chart as well. We saw Chatfield get some reps with the first team. We saw our final practice, or was it the scrimmage or the final practice? I can't remember. But Matthias Malachi Donaldson was on the first team. Was that that was a scrimmage, wasn't it?
I think we did see him on the scrimmage a little bit.
It was the scrimmage. Yeah, he was playing on the first team, and he had a forced fumble and a fumble recovery on the first team defensive line. This 3-star kid coming in from your latest recruiting class, they threw him on the defensive line. His brief snaps, he made some plays as well. So, it is, you might have to rely on a young guy or two if they're able to provide that spark. But, and Isaac Hodgins coming back too. That's a big one as well. He made some plays when he came back healthy. So that'll be something to see. Again, they impressed against the offense. They were able to get pressure. They did what they needed, flushing the quarterback out of the pocket and such, setting it up for the linebackers and a new linebacking core, or half a new linebacking core, for this year with Avery Roberts leaving. So it will be something to see. I want to see how they match up against Boise State, because they gotta get some pressure. They can't just let the guy sit back there and go untouched for 60, 70 snaps if that's what the case is. As far as we saw in fall camp, they did look good, but now it's time to do it when it matters.
No doubt. And again, September 3rd, 7:30 p.m. Research Stadium.
It's going to be a late night.
Half of Research Stadium, I should say. And TJ is absolutely right, as it will be a late night. But, I don't mind those late nights in September, especially when it's still really nice outside. I mind those late nights in November, when it's dark at 4:00, or whatever.
Dark at 4:00. You leave the press box at 1 a.m. and it's about 20 degrees outside and pouring rain, and you're just miserable. And you have to drive all the way back to Portland. So
yeah,
so
it can definitely it can be a bit of a haul. But like I said, normally it's not too bad early on. Since it's those later ones where maybe drags a little bit. But no, I'm excited to be down. And
I was going to say, so while we were there, we got to see what the press box setup is going to look like too, right? And you guys are going to be stuck in a nice essentially shipping container there, sitting on what will be eventually Beaver Street. Instead, the media will occupy Beaver Street for the first season of the new side. So that'll be interesting to see. I hope they have heat for you guys.
Man, we'll see, right? I mean,
they look pretty bare bones, but at least they had fake marble in there.
Yeah, we're gonna need like, just give me internet. That's all I need. Consistent,
Yeah.
reliable internet, which I know and come to say, can be a little tougher sometimes. But no, I'm super excited to be able to get to the stadium. Super excited to see, Beaver Nation back out in full force. And, it should be a pretty, it's gonna be an interesting environment having everybody packed into just that one kind of half of a U of the stadium. So it's going to be exciting. TJ and I will obviously be back with another edition of the podcast next week, TBD on the day, but we'll be previewing Boise State, talking about, the depth chart. I would assume we'll know who the starting quarterback is by then. So we'll definitely dive into all that. And again, we'll definitely bring on Dylan, our recruiting analyst as well, if he's got any late breaking recruiting stuff, as Jonathan Smith and his staff continue to make some waves on the recruiting trail. Good times definitely in Corvallis. So that'll go ahead and wrap up this edition of the podcast. Big thanks to TJ Mathewson for joining me on the pod. It was definitely a lot of fun. The first of many to come. We'll be back next week previewing the Boise State game. So keep it locked to BeaversEdge.com.